Hey everyone, just wanted to do a quick video here demonstrating how you could use MIDI Mod to recreate an iconic patch from one synth on another. And to do this we're going to use the Roland Alpha-Juno 2, and we will use the most iconic patch that it's known for. And you can see here I've got another iPad app. This is the IPG 800. It's a controller for the Alpha-Juno series and the JX8P, I believe. It's a fantastic app, super easy to use, and why we're using it is we're going to capture the parameters of this patch on here, and then it'll be much easier to recreate it because we'll have a visual reference. So here we go. I'm going to find the patch. That's what I'm looking for. All these parameters here are exactly what's here in the device, so now we've got that nice visual reference. So now we've seen the physical connections, now we need to set up the routing within MIDI Mod for using the System 8 as a controller. Just go to Settings, Note/Mod Inputs, UM1, and then Channel 1. Now we're good to go, and MIDI Mod will respond to whatever we send it from the System 8. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to just take a look at that screenshot we took earlier and try as best as I can to get those same parameters mapped, only using the device itself at first. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll start with the init patch on the OB-6. Now So now that we've got our init patch, I'm just going to start basically copying the parameters top to bottom, left to right, using that screenshot. Alright, so let's start with the LFO. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. Probably have to change it later, that's fine. And now let's move on to the oscillators. So we've got a pulse width and sawtooth together at once. Now the Alpha-Juno is a single DCO synth. We've got two oscillators here, so what we should do is just try to mimic it. So we're not going to use oscillator 2 at all. I'm just going to turn VCO2 down in the mix, and then we'll just have to do some kind of blend between saw and pulse. So somewhere right around the middle, and it looks like it's kind of a narrow pulse selected on the Alpha-Juno. I don't know, we'll just have to play around with it. And then the sub-oscillator is 2 octaves down. You know what then? Maybe we should forget about using the sub-oscillator because we can only go down 1 in the OB-6. So let's use VCO2 for that. And we'll just have to change the frequency. So let's see where we're at here. So now we've got our 2 octave sub, and yep, just get that all the way on square wave. Pretty nice beefy tone that we got there. Sub levels cranked all the way, so yeah, VCO2 cranked. Noise level is at 1, so we'll have to bring in a little bit of noise. so the oscillator levels are good, noise level feels pretty good for now. We need to figure out what to do with the pulse width modulation, because the Alpha-Juno essentially has its own dedicated LFO just for pulse width. Now in this case, we're going to need to use the LFO for other stuff, so maybe now's a good time to bring in MIDI Mod. So why don't we use an LFO from MIDI Mod to take care of the pulse width modulation? Go down to oscillator 1 pulse width. Now let's see if we got some PWM. Now the rate on the Alpha-Juno patch is pretty high, so let's just turn it up. Now I'm going to mess around with the shape a little bit. It's a little bit different because it doesn't have that wave folding to the entire waveform. It's just like the pulse aspect of this square wave and sawtooth blend, which is a little bit different than the Alpha-Juno, which actually does completely fold that sawtooth wave shape. Okay, but that's sounding pretty good to me. Can back it off a little bit just by adjusting the range. Kind of like that. Alright, we'll go with that for now. Let's move on to the filter. No high pass used on the Alpha-Juno. The cutoff around 6, resonance all the way down, and the LFO filter depth is a little more than halfway. So now let's bring in the LFO on the filter. Chorus. Alright, that's okay for now. Now, the last section and the most important one is the envelope section. And you can see that the Alpha-Juno has this strange envelope with multiple stages and different level settings per stage, and that's where the magic happens. OB-6 only has ADSR, so what do? We use MIDI Mod. And it just so happens that we have a very familiar envelope right here. Now all we gotta do is copy the settings. T2, L2 is up all the way, T4 about there, we're going to use this envelope to modulate pitch. Now we could do this a couple different ways. One way would be to route it to pitch bend, and then there we would have to make sure that we set up the range in the mod matrix so that it doesn't fall all the way back down to 0, because then we'll be at a pitch lower than where we started. So we could do that. Might have to play around with the range settings on the OB-6 as well. But I think what we should do is we should tap in to the capabilities of the device itself for modulating pitch, and we can do that by sending it aftertouch messages. So why don't we do that? We'll turn it on, and okay, nothing's happening right now because we have to turn on the modulation in the aftertouch section. So now I've turned the VCO1 and VCO2 on, and that will have the same effect as the DCO pitch modulation on the Alpha-Juno. And we just have to turn up the depth. Let's see what happens. Not too bad. Up a little bit. That's closer, I think. Now let's play with the envelope settings on the OB-6 so we can hear it. Not too bad. Now the Alpha-Juno also is using the envelope for both the filter and the amp, so we could do the same thing here, by literally assigning it to those two things. Why don't we try it? Not sure how this is gonna go, but let's give it a shot. Not bad. Alright, so I took the rest of the day to think about it and came back the next day, and what I have now is way better. So, as I was saying before, you might as well let the synth itself do the modulation. So we're already sending aftertouch messages from MIDI Mod to the synth, and then the synth can, in turn, modulate the pitch. And as we talked about before, on the Alpha-Juno, the envelope also affects the amp and the filter. Well, we're already using aftertouch to modulate the pitch. We've got amp and filter destinations in there, so we just turn those on. Now, if we look at the LFO section, you can see I've just made a couple tweaks. I've changed it to the fast setting so I can get higher than 4 Hertz. Didn't need to go much higher, only about 4.5. And then if we look at the mod matrix, we've got oscillator 1 pulse width, that's in the LFO that I just mentioned, 13 to 103. Now, you can see velocity is mapped to envelope 3 depth because the Alpha-Juno patch is velocity sensitive, and depending on how hard you hit the key, the pitch will move up or down even further. Likewise, the same thing with the filter. We've added that in as a way to add some dynamics to this patch. And then you can also see, even though I talked about not doing this before, envelope 3 will also modulate pitch bend, starting from 63, which is right in the center. So when the envelope completes, you'll be the pitch will be as it should be. It won't be lower than it normally is. All right, let's hear what this new version of the patch sounds like. Maybe play 2 keys at once. And then I'll show you now, hitting the key softer will get less dramatic result. Now I've got the Juno plugged in here for comparison too, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that for you a couple times. And now back to the OB-6. Okay, just one more quick tip. You're probably not going to have much effect on the filter if the cutoff is all the way up. So I brought the cutoff down, and then also just bringing in a little bit of attack on the filter, or excuse me, on the amp envelope, just to make it a little bit smoother. And then you can actually ignore what you see here in the filter envelope. So I turned the amount to neutral, so no effect from the filter envelope. Alright, now let's hear that. Now that sound matches a little better. So not a bad approximation now that I rather have thought some things through and figured out better ways to apply modulation in terms of delegating more to the synth itself. You're always going to get a better result, I think, a smoother outcome. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching.